Salute, salute. Grand rising to all. Salute to the internal indigenous spiritual most high. Y'all know. Trolls only God and your mama can love you. And last but certainly not least, ladies and gentlemen, one time, yeah. I say one time, yeah. I say one time, yeah. Get that energy flowing. This is going to be real informative, real resourceful. There's a lot of people that's not going to like this because it's the truth. And there's people who don't like the truth, y'all. You know what I'm saying? There's people who don't like the truth. So this is going to get a little deep. I got it set on subscribers only because, I get tired of the energy with the trolls, y'all. I get tired. Sometimes I just want to take a day off from having to cuss people out. You know what I'm saying? I feel like if hell did exist, I was going to bust it wide open because every day I got to cuss out a troll. So today, at least for right now, I'm taking time off, y'all. I'm enjoying my peace. So I got the chat set to subscribers only. You know what I'm saying? We ain't going to have all them trolls running up in here. It ain't happening. Sometimes they like to tear up your message. I'll wait to get a few more people in. You know what I'm saying? Do some shout outs and we'll get down to business early this morning. Because Michael Lane Jr. strikes again from Native Black ancestry. Y'all know him as Mike TV. Oh, my man got receipts. You will never guess what the U.S. government has admitted. Yep, we gonna go there. We gonna go there, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to go there. Matter of fact, why wait? Let's go there now. Here we go, y'all. Fair use, educational purposes, literary purposes, commentary purposes, all of that. All right. Normally, I would show y'all the computer screen, but I got in trouble for it last time. YouTube is getting more strict, and more strict. You know what I mean? But I'll show y'all things that matter. Here we go.
This conversation is not about opinions. It is not about feelings. And it's not about anyone promoting their beliefs. What I'm presenting tonight comes directly from U.S. government records, laws, and officials. You see, the United States government did not merely mislabel people. It reclassified indigenous Americans on paper into racial categories like Negro, mulatto, colored, and later African American, right? And that was not accidental. It was policy, and the receipts are undeniable. Let's start where the paper trail becomes impossible to deny. Virginia. You see, in 1924, Virginia passed a law called the Racial Integrity Act. This law reduced every person in the state to only two racial categories, white or colored. There was no Indian category, none. The man who enforced this law was the state registrar of vital statistics. His name, Dr. Walter Ashby Flecker. You see, Flecker controlled birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses, and he even altered records retroactively, sometimes decades later. And Flecker was very clear about what he was doing. In his own words, in a letter from 1943, Flecker wrote, quote, "There are no longer any real Indians in Virginia," end quote. Let that sit for a moment. He did not say Indians disappeared. He said they no longer exist legally. Flecker repeatedly claimed that
the paper genocide we talk about all the time. Hello, Pammy. How are you? But it's the same paper genocide we speak of all the time. And this is why, blessed, I love to hear that. Love it. I love it for you. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, let's hit the like button as we come in, please. Let's get this going in the algorithm. Very important to hit that like button. Very important. That's what gets it in the algorithm, y'all. And I'm trying to slide to the side and enjoy some PBJ, y'all know, an early morning snack. You know what I mean? So y'all see me slide off camera, I'm just stuffing my face, to be honest. You know what I mean? I'm stuffing my face. I was in the mood for a PBJ. Got me some PBJ and some apple juice. But let's hit the like button, ladies and gentlemen. Please and thank you.
Every Virginia Indian had what he called Negro blood. And because of that, they must be classified as colored. In another letter, Flecker wrote, quote, The so-called Indian families are actually mixtures of Negro blood. The application of the term Indian is fraud. End quote. This wasn't anthropology. This wasn't science. This wasn't administrative. This was administrative erasure at the highest degree. And let's be clear about who Plecker was targeting. These were not imaginary people. These were documented tribes. The Chickahominy, the Pamunkey, the Mattaponi, the Nasamon, the Mohican, the Nottoway, and the Rappahannock. These tribes had treaties dating back to the 1600s. They had reservations. They had colonial recognition, yet Plecker instructed hospitals, churches, and county clerks to reclassify them as Negro. Children born to Indian parents were labeled Negro. Indian marriages were reissued as colored. Entire bloodlines were changed on paper. Once that happened, those people lost everything: land rights, treaty rights, and recognition. That wasn't a mistake. That was the goal. And Virginia was not alone. Virginia was just the most aggressive and best documented example. Across the United States, especially in the South, indigenous people were reclassified through shifting census categories. Indian became mulatto, mulatto became colored, colored became Negro, later African American. And these shifts line up perfectly with land seizures.
Thanks to Jesse Jackson for the African American. And he's a full-blood Cherokee Indian.
Indian removal, and Reconstruction era labor systems. This is why the 1870 census.
That's right. Crispus Attucks. He was, that's right. That's a reminder. That's right. That's right.
Suddenly shows a massive explosion of Negro populations in areas that had previously been majority indigenous. Some of our ancestors show up on census records for the first time in the 1870 census, labeled as what? Negro. And those people didn't appear overnight. They were relabeled. Now let's talk about the Dawes Rolls, because this is where the federal government confirms the practice.
And these are acts that I talk about all the time. When people are asking for receipt after receipt after receipt, you constantly hear me mentioning the Dawes Rolls Act, the Racial Integrity Act, the Indian Removal Act, the Trail of Tears, the Homestead Act, the $5 Indian Act, the Eraser Act. You hear me spitting this at them all the time because I want to lead them in the right direction. But the thing is they're not asking me for these receipts for me to educate them on the truth because they're not interested in the truth. They were more interested in how did I know? We weren't supposed to know. We were never supposed to find out. And that's why they're getting so angry. So I tell people all the time, when you see these trolls and these racists go into this white rage, accept that for accountability because that is the closest you're going to come to guilt and accountability. They know the truth. And we're just now finding out the truth, but I tell everyone all the time, the lie should have quit when the internet hit. Y'all saw how many people left the room when I said what I said about the racists? You know, the lie should have quit when the internet hit. Let's go.
Between 1898 and 1914, the U.S. government created the Dawes Roll to divide tribal land and Indian territory. Instead of recording ancestry accurately, the government split people into categories: Indian by blood, white, and freedmen. Most people were taught that freedmen meant formerly enslaved Africans, but the records tell a different story. Many so-called freedmen had no African ancestry. They were indigenous people who had already been reclassified earlier as Negro. The Dawes Commission,
which were the same people that they set up to colonize Liberia. So if you look up the first black colonization in, Liberia, first African American colonization is what they're calling it. You'll notice that it's Liberia, but they don't tell you why. If you look up the capital of Liberia, it has the president's name in the capital, James Monroe. So in 1820, they took those freedmen, even though slavery still existed, they took those freedmen here who were actually indigenous and they coerced them into going to Africa. At least they could be around people who look like them because they didn't want the freedmen distracting and tempting the slaves to want to escape to be free as well. So they tried to get, that's part of the American Colonization Society, the ACS. Look that up, ladies and gentlemen. I'm giving it to you. People often ask for receipts, and I'm telling you exactly what to look up. Exactly what to look up. Look up the American Colonization Society.
refused to enroll dark-skinned Indians as Indian by blood, even when their parents and grandparents were listed as Indians. Same families, different labels. Why? Because freedmen could be denied land, denied sovereignty, and later denied recognition. Again, this was not biology, this was administration. So why was this necessary? Here's the part that textbooks don't say out loud. If the US government admitted that millions of people labeled Negro were actually indigenous Americans, oh, wait a minute, time out, foul in the play. Just let that sink in for a moment, guys. Just imagine that reality. Imagine that with me for a minute. Imagine if the US government.
And this is why they work so hard for us not to find out. This is why they flip mode when we mention things like reparations. You know, this is why. Maybe we'll start calling it compensation. Maybe it just sounds a little bit better. You know what I mean? We'll start calling it compensation. Oh, look, I'm finally ahead of time. That's my 2:45 a.m. alarm for me to get up and live stream. But I'm already on it. That means I'm doing good today. That means I'm doing good today. All right, I was already on it. Look at that. Already on it. Already on it.
Admitted that millions and millions, tens of millions of people labeled Negro were actually indigenous Americans. Then slavery becomes illegal enslavement of native peoples. Land seizures become treaty violations. States owe land, reparations, and recognition. Entire racial hierarchies collapse. So the solution wasn't just violence, it was paperwork. Change the label, erase the identity. Let time do the rest. Many know about slavery, but few discuss paper genocide.
And the reason they will hide it is to make you prove it. They want to make you depend on a DNA test. Okay? And this DNA test is not equipped to tell you. It's not equipped to tell you. It's not. And he's going to explain why.
We did not all come from Africa, and most of us have Aboriginal roots that were stripped away due to reclassification and miseducation. As a native Black American and a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, I understand the importance of tracing your lineage. If you want to learn how to trace your genealogy and apply for tribal citizenship, go to nativeblackAncestry.com to schedule a consultation.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British. Man, quite frankly, you was King's Merovingians. They took the women and men made them.
It's a court case. Look it up, guys. It's called Hudgins versus Wright. And Hudgins is spelled Hudgins. Hudgins versus Wright in 1806. The Virginia Supreme Court ruled that people who appeared Indian were presumed free because Indians were not legally enslavable under Virginia law. So what happens next? States changed the labels. By the 19th century, being classified as Negro stripped people of protections that indigenous status once gave them. Classification became destiny. This also is why DNA alone will never solve this. The government didn't erase indigenous people by removing their genes. They erased them by changing words on documents, birth certificates, censuses, marriage records, and land rolls. That's where the truth lives, not in DNA testing kits, in paperwork. So when people say the government never admitted this, here's the response. They admitted it every time they changed the label. They admitted it when they abolished Indian as a category.
They admitted it every time they reclassified us. Every time they reclassified us, they admitted it.
They admitted it when they created colored. They admitted it when they invented freedmen. They admitted it when they enforced one-drop laws. They admitted it when they destroyed tribal records. You don't need a press conference when the policy trail is that clear. So tonight, we're not debating myths. We're examining records. We're reading letters. We're naming laws. We're following paper trails. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because the real question is not, are Black Americans descendant from indigenous Americans? The real question is, how many were reclassified and how deliberately was it done? That is what we're unpacking tonight. So again, smash the like button on the way in, subscribe to the channel if you've yet to do so. Make sure to check out my website, nativeblackAncestry.com. You can get a copy of my...
Again, this is Mike TV. Michael Lane Jr., Native Black Ancestry. Y'all go subscribe. Hey, Mike gets it done. And let's take Mike's advice here and hit that like button and subscribe button while we're here as well, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to get that work in. We're going to get that work in.
New book, Reclassified, 5 Centuries of Paper Genocide, 1492 to 2025. But you know what? Tonight, what I want to do is in just a moment, we're going to actually vote on one of three different chapters of my book to go through on this broadcast, because I did such a thorough job citing the clear paper trail of racial reclassification throughout the centuries. We're going to get into the proof, the receipts. I'm going to cite my sources. But before we get there, let me show you guys a very peculiar document. Now, it took me a lot of money and a lot of time. I think I was doing research for like 9 hours straight one day to source this. This is a newspaper clipping from 1970.
Okay, now I'm not going to play this. I'm just going to show this as a still shot. And I don't think YouTube will mess with me. Okay? But what I'm showing you, even though it's going to be mirrored here and appear backwards to you, when is an Indian not an Indian? It's when he's a Negro. This is actually a news article from February 22nd. Looks to be, I can't see that date. They always left clues. Why associate the two if there was no relation? When is an Indian not an Indian? It's when he's a Negro. Let's go.
From a newspaper called The Rhode Islander. The title of the newspaper article was, "When is an Indian not an Indian? It's when he's a Negro." And this is a really strange, candid confession that I found in this newspaper article from a census taker. The census taker says, and I quote, "Who is an Indian? When the United States government counts heads, it says we are whatever we say we are." A census taker now working in South Kingstown in preparation for the 1970 census said recently, quote, "If they tell me they are Indian and they look Negro, I put down what they say and change it later." Aren't Indians supposed to have high cheekbones? So, I mean, guys, this is not clickbait. When the thumbnail displays the US government admits Negroes are the original American Indians, I mean, how else can we?
Which means we were replaced with those Bering Strait Siberian Asian Indians that they imported over here that you know as Native Americans. I tell you time and time again, when they start discussing the Pilgrims and Thanksgiving, they are celebrating the slaughter of us. We were those Indians. They are celebrating the slaughter of us. They celebrate everything that has to do with the slaughter of us. In your courtyards, at your courthouse, there are Confederate statues. That's not for them. They're proud of that. It's for us to see it. They're rubbing it in our faces. Okay? They're changing our voting rights, not Native American voting rights. They're changing our voting rights. They're rolling back the Civil Rights Act voting laws for us. For us, not the Native Americans that they imported over here that looks like them. Okay? Christopher Columbus specifically said, dark-skinned, copper-haired people. Dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. Copper skin. He specifically said it on more than one account. On more than one account. These people you know of Native Americans, they were imported. They were imported. Just like the majority of the white people in Brazil after the slave trade and during the slave trade. And right now today, Brazil is still 59% melanated. That's right, they imported them. Same thing they did with the South Afrikaners in South Africa. Same thing the colonizers did when they came here. They had more selling in by ship. Colonizing. Y'all know about those 13 original, y'all know. 13 original colonies. Y'all know.
Take this. We have a federal census taker saying people are putting down that they are Indian, and because he thinks that their cheekbones aren't high enough, he racially reclassifies them as Negro. Okay, all right, gotcha. I guess they didn't think that someone like me was going to do the digging, was going to pay the hundreds of dollars and spend the several hours it took to find this newspaper article. Okay. Okay. Hey, so you guys, what I want to do on this broadcast, and again, if you go to my website, nativeblackancestry.com, you can get a copy of my book. Right now, I'm selling it as an ebook. I'm working on getting paperback and hardcover within the next month or so. But let's go to the table of contents, shall we? Now, the main chapters that I think are most relevant to this discussion that we're having tonight is going to be chapters 5, 6, or 7. Chapters 5, 6, or 7. Let's talk about it. We're going to get into it. So what I want to do is I want to give you guys the luxury of choice, as I always do, whenever possible. And I want you guys to go ahead and vote in the chat. If you had to choose between chapter 5, 6, or 7, go ahead and put a number in the chat correlating to which chapter you're voting on. Which one do you want to get into? Again, I got this book on sale on the website for like $47, but I'll give you some free game tonight. I'm always down to give you some free game. Chapter 5 is 1800 to 1880, removal, reclassification, and federal control. Chapter 6 is 1880 to 1910, the Green Peach War and the Dawes Era. Chapter 7 is 1910 to 1950, the eugenics and racial integrity regime. That's what I was alluding to earlier with the whole Walter Plecker thing. But guys, go ahead and vote in the
Daniel Barry Sports Highlights. What it do, what it do, what it do.
chat. 5 for chapter 5, 6 for chapter 6, or 7 for chapter 7. We're going to get into it. And while we wait to see what the audience wants to discuss this evening, let's hear a quick word from one of my recent clients.
How y'all doing? My name's Major Wright. I just got done with my consultation with Mike. If you're trying to trace your ancestry, Mike is a good first step to go through. He's going to break it down to you, all 3 steps to get you what you need. And if you want somebody to maybe do the research for you, you pay that price and Mike can help you too. But yes, he will fill you up with knowledge that you never knew and give you all the things like those unanswered questions in your head throughout time. Talk to Mike, man. He's a great dude. I believe in Mike.
Yes, guys, if you didn't know, as a genealogist and card-carrying member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, it's my lifelong mission to wake you guys up to your indigenous heritage. So also through my website, nativeblackancestry.com.
Wake up, wake up, wake up. FBA. We gotta wake up. We have to wake up. We know we're foundational, but just how foundational are we? And why are we constantly reclassified? Why did we suffer from paper genocide? Why did they erase our history? Why did they erase and assume our identity? It's to gain your resources, to gain your land, to brainwash and control you. Brainwash and control you. This information was never supposed to be found. This information was never supposed to be put out to the public. We're not supposed to know anything about this. And I say all the time, the lies should have quit when the internet hit, ladies and gentlemen. The lies should have quit when the internet hit. You could burn a book. You could burn paperwork. You can shred it. You can listen. The internet is one huge cloud, and all you have to do is be curious enough to sit down and diligently do the research. Seeing is believing, and I must rather do the research and find out for myself rather than go with what someone else tells me. See, I'm a leader. I'll lead myself to the correct sources, to the correct information, and to the truth. I'm not going to follow someone's lie. I'm not going to follow someone's opinion.
I allow you guys to book an hour of my time to give you a genealogy consultation and teach you the 3-step process that me and my family used to trace our heritage and get tribal citizenship with the Muskogee Creek Nation back in 2021. But guys, it looks like most folks in the chat are voting for number 5. Israel says, is this a live or like a playback? Oh no, we live. It's a live. It looks like most of the people voted for number 5. So let's go ahead and get into it. Number 5, it is chapter 5. It is. Let me switch my screen over here real quick. And guys, I'm telling you, this book of mine, Reclassified, 5 Centuries of Paper Genocide, How Race Was Used to Erase Native Black Americans from 1492 to 2025. I mean, this is, call me biased, but this is well worth the money. This is the only book on the market that discusses century by century how racial reclassification was used to disenfranchise us, to displace us, and to destabilize our communities. Come on, y'all. There is no other book anywhere in the world like this. Somebody had to do it. And I answered the call. But you guys said chapter 5. What was chapter 5 again? Chapter 5 was 1800 to 1880. Oh, and you know what? I got a table of contents here. I don't know why I'm doing this the hard way. Here we go. 1800 to 1880, removal, reclassification, and federal control. Let's go ahead and get on into it. And this chapter is primarily discussing how the U.S. government used race to rewrite tribal identity. And I'm sorry, it would probably be best for me to actually share my screen with you and show you the pages that I'm reading from, just because some of these pages actually do have images as well. So I want you guys to be able to follow along. So again, this is my book, Reclassified, 5 Centuries of Paper Genocide. Excuse me, allergies been beating me up all day. I'm weird, y'all. I always sneeze twice. That's just the way it is. This is chapter 5, 1800 to 1880, removal, reclassification, and federal control. How the U.S. government used race to rewrite tribal identity. And we're starting out strong right here with an image of the Choctaws of Emmett, Louisiana. Hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't these black women? Racial reclassification is a hell of a thing. Colonization.
Okay, again, I'm going to show you the still shot. I'm not going to show you him talking. And hopefully YouTube doesn't strike me. Now, the Choctaws. Black women. Choctaws. Exactly. They look exactly what Christopher Columbus said. The Choctaws. This is one of the 5 sophisticated tribes that were already here upon colonization's arrival. The Choctaws. All right. That's one. That's one.
Is a hell of a thing because the Choctaws of Louisiana, and guys, right after this, we're doing a whole broadcast about Louisiana, but the Choctaws of Louisiana clearly are richly melanated women. Are they not? How else would you describe them? Let's talk about it. So would you be surprised to find out that the Choctaws nowadays, I mean, hey, do you guys want to go there? I mean, we can go there if you want to go there. I just want to know if you guys want to go there tonight. Clearly, we see the Choctaws
I hope
back
you go
in,
there.
well, when is this? 1850s? Right? Choctaws was looking like some beautiful black queens, right? Nowadays, this is what the Choctaws look like.
So the Choctaws went from those beautiful black women I just showed you all to this right here. All by paper genocide. All by paper genocide. How do you get how does something or someone who looks like this, the original Choctaw of 1850, how does they how can they look like that now? I told you, they assume everyone's identity. Do you know how many Caucasian people you have running around here saying that they're Indian, they're Native American, I've got 3%? No, you don't. It's fixed. It's rigged. You're compiling lies.
Kennedy, ginger hair, white broad. She's the first ever female tribal affairs advocate for the Choctaw Nation. So, guys, I got to ask you, how did the Indians start out so black, for lack of better terms? How they start out so black and get so white? Hey, we got a whole bunch of Europeans playing cowboys and Indian. Whole time we was the cowboys and we was the Indians. Let's talk about it, but I digress. Let's read through the chapter. Let me get off my soapbox. And the Choctaws featured right here. This is Melinda Tom Lawson in the middle. Melinda Tom Lawson was born in 1853 in Clinton, Louisiana, and died in 1934. Both parents were full-blood Choctaw. Full-blood Choctaw. That's what a full-blood Choctaw looks like. God, let me zoom in on this image. Can I zoom in? That's what full-blood Choctaw looks like. Not like the
Full-blood Choctaw Indian. Indigenous. Was here before the arrival of colonization. Now we see what these Indians look like now, these Native Americans. How did that happen? That's not by accident. We didn't jump in a tub of bleach and soak overnight and come out looking like the light-skinned version of Michael Jackson. We didn't do that. We didn't do that. Reclassification, ladies and gentlemen. Paper genocide, reclassification. They wanted the rights to assume our land, our culture, our identity, our resources. And they did just that. Just that.
These tontos you see in the media, not like these cracked out Asiatic Siberian Huskies you see on the res nowadays. I mean, come on. No, Coco, I ain't lying. Make it make sense. Facts to me, the facts. Mine says you're right. Cowboys and Indian, yeah, we was both. But see how they write us out of the story on all fronts. Lord, we haven't even got into the chapter yet. This is going to be a hell of an advertisement for my book, Low Key High Key, because guys, just reading one chapter of this with me, you're going to go to the website, nativeblack.ancestry.com. You're going to drop the 47 bucks to get you the full ebook download immediately. Because when you see how deep I'm getting with the receipts, oh my God, you've never seen it done like this before. Now let's read the actual chapter, shall we? I'm cooking so much just with the opening image.
Remember, ladies and gentlemen, as you come in, please hit that like button. Please hit that like button. Let's get this conversation flowing through the algorithm. That like button is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the like button. Let YouTube know we working up in here. Hit that like button. It's free. It's free to hit the like button.
Of the chapter. Good Lord. Let's get into the actual chapter, shall we? Melinda Tom Lawson is a lady in the center. Once again. And look at the phenotype. Look at the hair texture. Come on. By the early 1800s, the foundation of paper genocide was no longer an accident of colonial misunderstanding. It was a structure, a fully formed way of seeing, documenting, and categorizing indigenous peoples that had been built over 2 centuries of European confusion, exploitation, and racial rewriting. For dark-skinned indigenous nations across the Southeast, the century ahead would not bring clarity. It would bring federal intervention. And federal intervention meant that misclassification was no longer a local habit, it was a national policy. This was the century when Indian agents replaced traders, when racial categories replaced kinship, when census enumerators replaced clan mothers, and when Washington, not the tribal towns, decided who counted as Indian. More than any previous era, the 19th century turned appearance into law and law into identity. By the time the Dawes Commission emerged in the 1890s, the system was not beginning, it was reaching maturity. Scottish influence on the rise of the mixed blood elite. Long before Indian removal, a quiet transformation had been underway. Scottish traders, soldiers, and adventurers were entering the Southeast as early as the 1500s. Many married indigenous women, sometimes through genuine union, often through economic strategy. Under the matrilineal laws of the Southeast, these Scottish husbands gained trade access, land rights, political influence, and the protection of the mother's clan. Their children, raised inside indigenous towns, bilingual and bicultural, became a powerful intermediary class. By the 1800s, these mixed Scots individuals were being groomed by colonial governments and later the United States to serve as interpreters, negotiators, bureau favorites, and agents of federal policy. They were strategically positioned to influence, sign, or justify the very treaties that dismantled their own nations. Some of the most consequential land cession signatures in the Southeast were placed there by men of mixed Scottish indigenous ancestry. Men whose fathers benefited from colonial expansion and whose dual identities were weaponized in moments of crisis. William McIntosh, a case study in divided loyalties. No figure embodies this dynamic more clearly than William McIntosh, a Creek leader whose mother was Muskogee and whose father was a Scottish settler. McIntosh rose to prominence due to his bicultural connections, business dealings, and close alliances with American officials. But in 1825, he signed the Treaty of Indian Springs. Come on, y'all. In 1825, he signed the Treaty of Indian Springs, ceding almost all remaining Creek lands in Georgia. He did so without the authorization of the Creek National Council. His cousin, George Troup.
How do we feel about this? He's citing sources. He's calling names. He's citing the year. He's citing the act. He's citing everything. And all we have to do, all you have to do is go look this stuff up. And you can validate this yourself. If you've ever wondered why they dislike Black people so much, this is why. We must never know or learn the truth because no one protests like us. No one. If we found this out, we could turn this country, this economy belly up almost in a week's time. Just simply by protest alone. And we can. See, so this time it's not about civil rights. It's about returning what rightfully belongs to us, the indigenous people of this land, before it was America, before it had a flag, before it had a title. It was already civilized by us. You can't discover something that's already in existence, especially something that's already inhabited with people.
The governor of Georgia, also of Scottish ancestry, pushed aggressively for the treaty's enforcement despite federal objections. It was a family alliance that aligned perfectly with state ambition. Creek law declared unauthorized land cessions a capital offense. So Creek warriors marched to McIntosh's plantation, burned it, and executed him for treason against the nation. This moment exposes a deeper truth about removal era treaties. Many were signed by mixed heritage intermediaries acting outside the will of their own people, often under pressure or reward from state and federal governments. The first federal admission of lookership. In the decades leading up to removal, Indian agents were appointed throughout the Southeast. These men, some white, others mixed indigenous themselves, were supposed to mediate disputes and report conditions. Their records reveal something else entirely, a racial worldview that overpowered every genealogical and cultural fact before them.
Still shot so I don't get in trouble. Black American Indian, y'all. We were robbed. We've been deceived. We've been duped. They've lied to us as they always do, ladies and gentlemen. As they always do. I tell you all the time, we're not African American. You cannot be of two different countries, two different cultures. You can't. You can't. They're throwing us off. They shipped us to Liberia, Africa in 1820 on a ship called Elizabeth, 88 freedmen. Upon those men returning, they began to say things like go back to Africa, and they got Jesse Jackson to actually call us African Americans after that. It was all a part of the Eraser Act. It was all a part of colonization. These people cannot be trusted and shall not be trusted and will not be trusted, at least not by me.
U.S. Indian agent wrote in 1803, quote, among the Creek, there are many of dark complexion who are taken by the whites to be Negroes, end quote. This was not a report of misunderstanding. It was a confirmation of the racial system the government relied on. Another official in 1812 declared, quote, those of the tribes who dwell near the colored settlements are commonly considered as colored themselves, regardless of their Indian parentage, end quote. Indigeneity had been replaced by proximity. Living near Black people became grounds for losing legal Indian status. Missionaries continue the quiet erasure. Missionary schools and churches trusted by federal officials more than...
I told y'all, everyone melanated back then identified by tribe. Only Caucasians, Europeans, colonizers identified by color. They invented colorization. You either identify by tribe or by language, by location, not by color. That was the blooming of racism.
By tribes repeated the same pattern. Their records became future evidence. A mission register from the 1820s stated, quote, several among the Seminole and Creek of dark hue have been entered in our rolls as colored persons, end quote. No investigation, no clan verification, no cultural consideration. A dark-skinned indigenous child was colored, if the missionary said so. And federal agencies later treated these entries as fact. Church books became civil books. Civil books became federal books. Federal books became tribal enrollment evidence. Long before removal, paper had already replaced people. Indian removal, the federal crisis of racial sorting. When Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, the stakes of racial labeling turned deadly. The government now needed to decide who must be removed, who could stay, who qualified for annuities, who would be abandoned entirely. Instead of consulting tribal governments, federal officials turned to the racial categories created by the British 2 centuries earlier. The results were catastrophic. Throughout the 1830s, dark-skinned members of the Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Seminole nations were reclassified as colored, free-colored, mulatto, or Negro, even if they were full-blood, spoke their languages, and held authority within their own nations. In 1833...
So regardless, if you were dark, if you were Indian and you were dark, you were reclassified. Colored, free colored, mulatto, or Negro. Now we have African American. Before, we were Indian. That's it in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. Before that, we were Indian.
Indian office correspondent stated, quote, "Some persons living among the Indians are not deemed Indians for their color." End quote. This was official policy. Phenotype over ancestry, appearance over kinship, race over nation. The Georgia Gold Rush, the hidden engine behind removal. Sidebar, most of you guys have never heard of the Georgia Gold Rush. In school, they teach us about the California Gold Rush. They don't tell us that right before they kicked the Indians out of Southeast, they discovered gold in the Southeast, which was one of the main motivating factors of kicking my ancestors off our land. We had gold. Just like the Spanish rummaging and pillaging all through the Caribbean, Central and South.
I told you to steal your resources and to assume your identity. I told you. And they were big on land. They were big on land and farming and everything. So I mean, if they had to travel the world globally and take over just for good farmland, they did that. They did that. There was nothing that these people wouldn't do, and there's still nothing that these people won't do right now today, ladies and gentlemen.
America for what? For gold. Let's talk about it. And this image depicts the Georgia Gold Rush. Another force, accelerated removal, gold. In 1828, gold was discovered in the Cherokee Nation in what became known as the Georgia Gold Rush, the first major gold rush in American history. A similar phenomenon occurred in Alabama shortly after. The discovery triggered massive white encroachment, fraudulent land lotteries, state militia raids, and the total disregard of Cherokee sovereignty. Georgia wanted the land. The federal government wanted the gold. Removal became the fastest way to acquire both. Erased on the trail, counting out darker-skinned natives. During removal, soldiers marched indigenous families westward and kept tallies as they moved. These soldiers were not trained in genealogy. They were simply told to number the Indians. One 1835 logbook recorded, quote, "The darker sort among them we took for Negroes and did not add to the Indian tally," end quote. Those individuals...
They're steady admitting to the reclassification. How many times have you heard black, Negro, and Indian all in the same sentence, ladies and gentlemen? These people went out of their way to import other people and call them Native Americans. Native Americans. You have Caucasians running around here talking about they are Indian. You are not Indian. You are Caucasian. You are European. You are German. You are Polish. You are Sicilian. You are all of that. You are not indigenous. You are not Indian. You are not. I reference the $5 Indian Act all the time. All the time. Google it. Look up the $5 Indian Act.
Full citizens of their nations were erased in real time. They were not recorded as Indian. They were not recorded as anything. Their descendants would spend generations searching for ancestors who were intentionally deleted before ever reaching Indian territory. Left behind, the enslavement of dark-skinned indigenous peoples. And this is an image displaying what we're discussing right now.
Here we go. Here we go. POWs after reclassification. Here we go. They were sent to plantations after reclassification. This led to the Trail of Tears, ladies and gentlemen. This led to the Trail of Tears, ladies and gentlemen.
Matter of fact, go to the website, nativebblackancestry.com. You can get access to a digital archive with over 600 documents. And on my site, I have ex-indigenous slave interviews where Indians talk about being kidnapped from Indian territory and sent to the plantation. This is history, not theory. Not all Southeastern indigenous people walk the Trail of Tears. Those with darker skin were often reclassified as Negroes and enslaved in place. They remained in the Southeast not because they were permitted to stay, but because they were no longer recognized as indigenous at all. These communities, stripped of tribal identity, entered slavery system and later emerged from the Civil War as freedmen, not as citizens of the nations they descended from. And this set the stage for a new form of erasure during Reconstruction. Reconstruction in the Freedmen's Bureau. When Reconstruction officials arrived in former Indian territory in the Southeast, they encountered dark-skinned indigenous people living as citizens in their nations. The federal officers assumed they were African Americans. A Reconstruction report from 1867 noted, quote, Many of the said Indians appear as Negroes to our officers and are so classed unless great care is taken. End quote. Great care was rarely taken. The misclassification intensified. Entire indigenous families were merged into freedmen status, a designation that would later be used to exclude them from tribal citizenship. The American Colonization Society and the racial reassignment of indigenous people. Beginning in the early 1800s, the American Colonization Society, or ACS, promoted the idea that anyone reported as colored or Negro, regardless of indigenous ancestry, should be encouraged or pressured to immigrate to Africa. ACS agents visited mixed indigenous communities throughout the Southeast, telling them, "You are not Indians. Your ancestry is African. America is not your home. Your destiny is in Liberia." This campaign targeted communities that had already been misclassified on paper, further enforcing the racial boxes created centuries earlier. Removal pushed indigenous people west. ACS pushed them out of the country entirely. Both operated on the same.
See, I've been telling y'all about the ACS, the American Colonization Society. I was referencing that earlier when I said 1820, a ship named Elizabeth, 88 freedmen. Same thing. Same thing. Everybody can't tell the same lie, man. The research is out there, man. The research is out there. We've got so much time to do so many other things that's not constructive. When are we going to take time to actually do something that's constructive and pro us, pro truth? Pro truth. We're living in a government in a time that's not going to tell us the truth. Everything is a deception. Everything is an illusion. All right? And these people are delusional to think that we don't know who we are. They are delusional to think that we are not doing the work, doing the research. You know, the way that we're treated compels us to do the damn research alone. Why do these people hate us so much? Let's check this out. Why are these people always lying? Let's check this out. Why are they always handing us these damn Bibles? Let's check this out. All it takes is curiosity for a mind that's untrained. You can't train me never to doubt. I'm going to doubt everything. I'm going to doubt everything. I'm going to question everything. That is the only way to learn. I was told there is no such thing as a stupid question. The only stupid question is the question you don't ask. So I'm going to ask time and time and time and time again. I'm going to search time and time and time and time again. And I'm going to get on here and I'm going to tell you the truth about who we are time and time and time and time again until you are curious enough to do the research on your own, ladies and gentlemen. This is not far-fetched. These are government documents. This is not far-fetched. These are government documents. When I tell you, Black people, you are indigenous, you are not African, you are Indian, you are tribal, you were here, they were not. They took your land, they lied to you, they assumed your resources, they assumed your identity. They counted you out to count themselves in. It's the takeover. Colonization was a global takeover. Christianity was a global takeover.
Belief. Indigenous identity could be reassigned, overwritten, or erased whenever convenient. Indian Territory misclassification continues. After removal, the southeastern nations rebuilt in Indian Territory, but misclassification did not end. Outsiders, federal officials, missionaries, traders, and white settlers continued labeling dark-skinned tribal citizens as freedmen, Negro Indians, colored Creeks, slaves, or simply Negro. A missionary in 1848 wrote, quote, "In the Creek Nation, there are Indians of every condition, some very dark, and these by outsiders are taken for Africans," end quote. Indigeneity no longer belonged to the tribe, but belonged to the observer. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that wraps up that chapter. The following chapter gets into 1880 to 1910, the Green Peach War, and the Dawes Era. Again, make sure to check out the website nativeblack.ancestry.com. Not only can you book a one-on-one genealogy consultation with me where I teach you how to trace your heritage and get tribal citizenship if that's something you're interested in, but you can also get a copy of my new book, Reclassified, 5 Centuries of Paper Genocide, How Race Was Used to Erase Native Black Americans, 1492 to 2025. I take you all the way through the centuries, bit by bit by bit.
It was a great session. It was a lot of informal information that was given.
I'm definitely purchasing that book. I am definitely purchasing that book. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mike's TV. Now we're going to get into the Racial Integrity Act. We heard him mention that. Let's get into that now.
Now, it says VirginiaIndianArchive.org. It says letter from Walter Plucker, January 1943. It says in a letter dated January 1943, and addressed to local registrars, physicians, health officers, nurses, school superintendents, and clerks of the court, Walter A. Plucker, the state registrar of vital statistics, warns his colleagues or parents whom he believes may be falsifying their children's racial designations are also listed by county are the surnames of families he designated mongrels. Plucker was charged with enforcing the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 and subsequent related legislation which banned interracial marriage in Virginia and asked for voluntary racial identifications on birth and marriage certificates. White was defined as having no trace of African ancestry, while all other people were defined as colored. Falsifying racial information on a government form was a felony. To accommodate elite Virginians who claimed Pocahontas and John Rolfe as ancestors, the law allowed those who had 1/16 or less of the blood of the American Indian and have no other non-Caucasic blood to be deemed to be white persons. And the source was University of Virginia Library, Special Collections. It says coverage of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, 20th century. The Bureau of Vital Statistics, Richmond. So there you have it. That's a source that's talking about colored people, but it's not just that simple. That colored people didn't just refer to people as African ancestry. It was basically a category for American Indians that they wanted to strip away their Indian identity. So let's click on Racial Integrity Act. Now this is from the Encyclopedia of Virginia. Racial Integrity Laws, 1924-1930. It says racial integrity laws were passed by the General Assembly to protect whiteness against what many Virginians perceived to be the negative effects of racial mixing. They included the Racial Integrity Act of 1924, which prohibited interracial marriage and defined as white a person who has no trace whatsoever of any blood other than Caucasian.
You know what really gets me is they fight so hard to talk about we need more white babies. The white population is decreasing at a rapid pace. Birth rates are decreasing. They import white people. Those white people die off, get sick from the sun, get cancer, whatever. But they can't seem to populate the earth the appropriate way. And they're not seeing yet that maybe it's a curse. Maybe it's a veil due to all the evils you've rendered other nations and ethnic groups of people throughout this world and throughout your existence. You can't fix it by claiming everyone to be white. Sometimes you have to fix your white ways to have bright days. You have to fix your white ways to have bright days. You have to.
The Public Assemblies Act of 1926, which required all public meeting spaces by strictly segregated, and a third act passed 1930 that defined as black person who had even a trace of African American ancestry. This way of defining whiteness as a kind of purity and bloodline became known as the one-drop rule. Okay. So, and it said here, Virginia Indians were particularly incensed by the laws and by Plucker in particular because the state seemed intent on removing any legal recognition of Indian identity in favor of the broader category, colored. Okay. So then we're going to go here. I'm going to type in racial integrity act.
My home is like one of those stereotypical places. Why they wait till I live stream and now I got a smoke detector that's chirping? Don't worry, it'll be fixed by Monday. Wait, good. I start live streaming. I hit chirp, chirp, and they always be like, "Black people don't never change their batteries in their smoke detector." It just started on this live stream. Just started, but I promise it will be changed. It will be changed. I had to get up and find like, okay, I hear it. Where are you? It will be changed. All right. Don't judge me. Okay, so we get the gist of the Racial Integrity Act. We get the gist of that. All right. The dark history of the Dawes Rolls Act. Let's go.
The year 1887 marked a turning point. The United States government passed the General Allotment Act, known as the Dawes Act. Sponsored by Senator Henry L. Dawes, it aimed to assimilate Native Americans into mainstream society. The act sought to dismantle communal land ownership, a core aspect of Native life. Tribes held land collectively, but the act proposed dividing it into individual parcels. Each Native American head of household would receive a plot, usually 160 acres. The government believed this would teach Native Americans about private property and self-sufficiency. The ultimate goal was assimilation, erasing distinct cultures. But behind these intentions lay a more complex reality. The Dawes Act was also about land. Vast amounts of native land were at stake, desired by many white Americans. The act provided a legal mechanism for transferring land from native control to white control. The promise of assimilation often masked the reality of dispossession. The shadow of this act would stretch long, impacting generations of native people.
And this was the start of the $5 Indian.
I've been in the same situation, and instead of a HELOC or a personal loan, my husband and I decided to get a home equity investment with a
This right here was the start of the $5 Indian Act. After the Dawes Rolls Act, when they actually assumed the property, it was beginning the $5 Indian Act, to where they sold land for $5 to anyone Caucasian that could prove that they had at least like 3% Indian in them. So with people working the U.S. Census, it was easy to pay people off to say, hey, I've got 3% in me and I want to assume this land for like $5 back then, $5, which was a big deal. That's why it's called the $5 Indian Act. Y'all can look this stuff up. You can look this stuff up.
Implement the Dawes Act, the government had to identify who was eligible for land allotments. This led to the creation of the Dawes Rolls, official lists of tribal members. The Dawes Commission, established in 1893, aimed to convince certain tribes to accept allotment. These tribes were the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole nations. The process of creating the Dawes Rolls was painstaking and often flawed. Commission members traveled to Indian Territory, setting up enrollment centers and interviewing thousands. People had to prove their native ancestry and membership in one of the 5 tribes. This was difficult for many, as oral traditions were strong and written records scarce. The commission demanded specific kinds of proof, often misaligned with tribal ways of knowing kinship. The final rolls, completed in 1907, contained over 101,000 names.
And pay attention to the skin complexion, ladies and gentlemen. Pay attention to the skin complexion, ladies and gentlemen.
These individuals were deemed entitled to an allotment of land. However, the rolls were far from perfect, excluding many legitimate tribal members. The Dawes Rolls became a definitive record, used to distribute land and determine future tribal membership. This act of listing and categorizing was an act of power, reshaping internal tribal identities. The primary purpose of the Dawes Rolls was to facilitate the division of communally held tribal lands. Once enrolled, individuals received their allotted parcel, varying in size based on family status and treaty agreements. The idea was that each enrolled member would become a private landowner, encouraging farming and a settled lifestyle. After all eligible individuals received their allotments, vast tracts of tribal land often remained. This surplus land was opened up for sale to non-native settlers, a key objective for many supporters of the act. The sale of surplus lands generated revenue, but little of it directly benefited the tribes sustainably. The Dawes roles were supposed to ensure fairness, identifying legitimate tribal members to prevent fraud.
I saw something interesting, but I can't. Here it is. These are the families we're talking about. Again, look at the skin complexion. These are the people who were affected by the Dawes-Rolls Act. Look at the complexion. They were later called African Americans. Hello, people. Hello, people. Hello, people.
Identifying legitimate tribal members to prevent fraud. However, defining identity through bureaucratic lists was problematic, reducing complex tribal identity to a set of criteria. The process was rife with inconsistencies and injustices, often leading to broken promises. Ultimately, the Dawes rolls served the government's broader agenda of land acquisition and assimilation. By individualizing land ownership, the act weakened tribal cohesion, making it easier for land to pass out of native hands. Amidst the Dawes enrollment, a disturbing phenomenon emerged: the rise of the so-called $5 Indians. These were predominantly white individuals who sought enrollment by falsely claiming Native American ancestry. The term $5 Indian likely came from the cost of a lawyer, a fraudulent affidavit, or a bribe. These individuals were motivated by the desire for land, as Indian territory held valuable resources. They had to falsify their identity and
So earlier when I showed you how dark those Indians were, the 3 black women, and then they were transformed into a white woman, this is how. This is how that took place. These people will not claim their Eurocentric kinsmanship. They won't do it. They assume everyone's identity so that they can assume the resources, the land, and the benefit of, regardless of the indigenous people. It hurts.
convince the Dawes Commission of their native heritage. The methods varied, from fabricating family trees to relying on false testimony. The Dawes Commission, overwhelmed and under pressure, often had inadequate verification procedures. Many fraudulent claims slipped through the cracks, diverting land intended for legitimate tribal members. This further diluted the already shrinking tribal land base and created deep resentment within native communities. The term $5 Indian became a derogatory label, symbolizing the corruption and injustice of the allotment era. The success of $5 Indians in gaining land hinged on several factors. The Dawes Commission's process was often ill-equipped to handle the complexities of native identity. Commissioners, lacking deep understanding of tribal kinship systems, relied heavily on written documents and sworn testimonies. The burden of proof often fell on the applicant, but standards for proof were inconsistent. Weak verification and limited resources created loopholes for fraud. The commission faced pressure from politicians, land speculators, and railroad companies to complete the roles swiftly. This rush often meant claims were not thoroughly investigated. Some officials were reportedly corrupt, accepting bribes to approve questionable applications. $5.
Accepting bribes. Accepting bribes to confirm other tribal allegations. Everything about these people is a lie. It's built on a lie. It's fixated on a lie. This is all we ever get from these people are lies. Are lies. The lies should have quit when the internet hit, man.
Indians often paid individuals to provide false affidavits attesting to their supposed native ancestry. The impact on legitimate tribal members was severe, as many struggled to prove their own heritage. The infiltration of the rolls by $5 Indians was an act of theft, compounding the injustices of the Dawes Act. The Dawes Act had a catastrophic impact on Native American land ownership. Before the act, Native nations collectively held vast territories, the basis of their cultures and economies. The act aimed to break this up, and it succeeded dramatically.
Pay attention, y'all. What color are those Indians? They would call those Africans African Americans right now. They were Indians. Let me make this picture bigger for you. They were Indians. They were Indians. Black people. FBA. Y'all better stand up, man. Y'all better stand up. Y'all better stand up. Got to take this land back. Huh? We got to get what's ours, man.
This up, and it succeeded dramatically. Native Americans lost about 90 million acres of land, roughly 2/3 of their total land base. Allotments were often held in trust by the government for 25 years, supposedly to protect native landowners. But after the trust period, landowners received full title and could sell their land. Many were pressured or tricked into selling, and poverty forced sales. The sale of surplus lands, open to white settlers, was another major cause of land loss. The proceeds from these sales were often mismanaged or insufficient to compensate for the loss. The result was a fragmented pattern of land ownership, undermining tribal governance and sovereignty. The loss of land had devastating economic consequences, pushing many native communities into deeper poverty.
Advance into leadership with a BS in electrical engineering technology. Excelsior University's ABET accredited.
The Dawes Act and the Dawes Rolls did more than strip Native Americans of their land. The policies tore at the fabric of Native societies, undermining traditional governance structures. Tribal councils and leaders saw their authority diminished as the U.S. government imposed new forms of organization. The focus shifted from the collective to the individual, assaulting long-standing cultural values. The emphasis on individual land ownership eroded communal bonds and pitted family members against each other. The enrollment process created lasting divisions, with disputes over.
Again, look at these Indians, ladies and gentlemen. Look at these Indians, ladies and gentlemen.
Legitimate tribal membership. The rolls, often inaccurate, became the basis for determining citizenship, leading to exclusion and resentment. The introduction of blood quantum further complicated matters, affecting tribal identity and enrollment. The loss of land led to economic.
Look at the Indians, ladies and gentlemen. Who do they resemble? Doesn't look like an African to me. Sammy.
Despair, contributing to social problems like health and education. The forced assimilation policies aimed to erase Native identity.
Doesn't look like an African to me. Doesn't look like an African to me. Indians. Indians.
Inflicting deep trauma. The Dawes Rolls were a tool for social engineering, fracturing communities and disorienting individuals. The Dawes Act was a crucial component of American colonization and westward expansion. From the earliest encounters, European powers and the United States sought to acquire native lands and control native peoples. The Dawes Act represented a new phase in this ongoing effort, shifting tactics but maintaining the same underlying goal. The ideology of manifest destiny fueled much of this expansion, portraying Native Americans as obstacles. Assimilation policies like the Dawes Act were presented as benevolent but masked a brutal agenda of cultural destruction and land expropriation. The act aimed to destroy tribalism, imposing individualism and private property as cornerstones of the American way. This policy was a form of cultural genocide, seeking to eradicate native languages.
What color? What color? Exactly what Christopher Columbus left account of.
Religions and social structures, boarding schools, another tool of assimilation, worked in tandem with the Dawes Act, attacking the cultural base. Together, they represented a concerted effort to eliminate Native Americans as distinct peoples. The act was a legal instrument of conquest, using the language of property rights to achieve colonial ends.
All right, y'all. These are things that you can look up. I'm actually going to get ready to call it a night. I got to get some sleep, get back up for some more live streaming. You know, we're going to get the truth out there. One way or the other, I'm going to bring this truth home. You know, I'm going to bring this truth home. Sammy, don't come in here with the Bible stuff, man. Why do you always do this, brother? I'd be glad to see you, but damn, don't bring that biblical indoctrination stuff in here, man. Wake up, dude. Damn, they really got y'all effed up in Africa. That ain't got, that Bible crap ain't got nothing to do with what I just said. Yeah, it's pretty late. It's 3:42 a.m. So I'm gonna get ready to lay it down because I got to be right back up and live streaming, in the morning. So I'm probably gonna get maybe 2, 3 hours worth of sleep total and be right back up and at it again. In order to make the money, you got to clock in. So I've got to clock in, ladies and gentlemen. With that being said, I've enjoyed everyone's time. You know, I enjoy everyone's attention. I want everyone to challenge what you hear. You know what I'm saying? I want everyone to challenge what you hear. Question it. Go do the research. Look up these different acts. Stop trusting your government. Stop trusting a certain demographic of people, man. They're not in this for you. They're in it solely for them. But in order for them to maintain what they've stolen from you, they have to keep you blind about who you really are. Again, which is why they get so upset when the term reparations start floating around. Okay? Y'all know what to do, man. Get your one-on-one. Get your one-on-one. Get your one-on-one with the real, indigenous, internal, spiritual Most High, y'all. None of that colonial stuff. Semi, none of that colonial stuff. All right? None of that colonial stuff. Let it go, man. Let it go. It's bondage. It's a lie. It's trickery. It's trickery. It's brainwash. It's control. It's manipulation. It's demonic. Let it go. All right? Y'all stay prayed up, stay blessed up, stay meditated up, stay protected. Stay real. Stay conscious. Stay uncut. Be inspired. Be great. And be you. Do the research. Find out who you really are. Ashe.